Hello and welcome to Tech Time Live. My name is Jonathan Ott, and I'm proud to be the Digital Marketing Specialist for BEA. With me today are Jacob D. Bautista and Rob Rivera, both Technical Service Specialists at BEA. Today's topic will be the LZR-FLATSCAN comparison. BEA's LZR-FLATSCAN SW and LZR-FLATSCAN 3D SW are laser-based sensor systems designed for automatic swing doors. In this Tech Time Live session, our techs will cover the differences between the two sensors. Topics covered include physical construct and applications, wiring, dip switches, IR fields, and virtual push button. Let's take it over to Jake and get things started.
Welcome to Tech Time Live. I'm Jacob, and I'm going to be going over some of the comparisons between the FLATSCAN and the FLATSCAN 3D, as well as the structural difference of the microscan with them. I'm going to be going over the physical structure and the wiring, and after that, Rob Rivera of the tech team is going to be going over some of the other features like the output configuration. So what we're going to get started with is the physical structure. This sensor right here is the original laser sensor for a pedestrian door. That's the microscan. You can see how this compared with the regular FLATSCAN SW. They're probably about 1.5 inches out. The FLATSCAN is, at least it's about 1.5 inches. This is a little bit more. This compared to the FLATSCAN 3D, very much difference. It's probably about double. So here's why what sensor would be good over the others. We're not going to talk about the microscan much because the point of this is more for a FLATSCAN versus 3D comparison, but this is good for fire rated doors. And that's something we can get into later. So the FLATSCAN SW regular is good for more tighter spaces. So if you have just a regular door and when it opens up, there's a wall there and there's very minimum room. With a microscan, you'd probably hit that wall. With the FLATSCAN, it's so thin that this is ideal because it learns out that wall so it doesn't keep seeing it, as well as guide rails. They all do. And it won't hit the wall, so there's going to be no damage to your sensor. The 3D in that application would not be able to make that work, but it's good for pairs of doors where there's a lot of space, or single doors where there's a lot of space between the door open position and the wall. It has 4 curtains versus much more further than versus what the FLATSCAN regular can do. If you look inside, it actually has the microscan head. So it's basically the FLATSCAN SW combined with the microscan, and you get the FLATSCAN 3D. Here's the inside of the 3D. Look off the FLATSCAN. Here's the inside of the FLATSCAN. So comparison, there's really not that much difference. With the regular FLATSCAN, you have the circuit board exposed. With the 3D, you do not. They both have the button on there to do a learn. And you can see that there's 4 dip switches on each sensor. Now, dip switch 1 and 2 for both sensors are the same, as well as 4, but we changed dip switch 3. On the regular FLATSCAN, dip switch 3 was how you chose the output configuration of normally open versus normally closed. Dip switch 3 on the 3D, that is no longer the case. You have to do that by remote, and that's something that Rob's going to show us here in a bit. Dip switch 3 is now anti-masking in background, which you could turn that on or off. We can go into what each of these dip switches mean in a later video. I would also advise to go to the user's guide because we have a good detailed explanation of each one. So that's the physical structure. We're going to get into the wiring. What I have in my hand here is a regular FLATSCAN 3D harness. Each FLATSCAN harness is plug and play, at least into the sensor, and hardwired at the end. So you can see it's a little 10-pin plug here. At the other end, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 wires. With a regular FLATSCAN, you would have 8. So on the 3D harness, there was a little bit of a structural difference. We have 2 gray wires here for a virtual push button. What the virtual push button is let's say you have your FLATSCAN 3D and you have it up on the door. You can put, if you double tap on that learn button on the FLATSCAN, you can put your hand not in front of the door, but out to the side. So let's just say from this shelf over is the door. To the side of the door, you can put your virtual push button. It'll learn your hand, and anytime you go to put your hand there, it's going to turn blue. Now, this is for means of a secondary activation. Do not use this as a primary. You're still going to need your proper knowing act devices in terms of ANSI compliance. So a push plate or a wave to open switch, anything that qualifies as a knowing act. So make sure that you follow the ANSI standard. We have red and black for power, white and green for reactivation. This, you do want to wire it into reactivation. Blue and brown is for stall. And then we have 2 purples for monitoring. This is what I had to show for the FLATSCAN versus FLATSCAN 3D comparison, was the structural differences as well as the wiring harness. Up next, we're going to go to Rob. He's going to go over a few things he wants to explain. And we're going to get started with the dip switch configuration.
So I'm Rob Rivera with BEA Tech Support. I work right alongside with Jake. And I'm going to be going over some of the different aspects of the FLATSCAN 3D versus the FLATSCAN SW. Some of the aspects of it that make them different, and what are the application differences, and why would you use one versus the other. So I'm going to start with where Jake kind of left off, talking about the dip switches. So on the FLATSCAN SW, you can see here, they both share the same configuration with 4 dip switches. However, those dip switches are significantly different. This FLATSCAN SW has a pretty simple layout. Dip switch 1 chooses either the stop side or swing side, or the approach side, the reactivation side, reopen side as it's listed. Dip switch 2 is used for environmental. It changes the immunities and some of the aspects of the sensor so it can cope with lighting that affects it negatively. Dip switch 3 would be your output configuration. So it would change your relay to be either normally open or normally closed on the FLATSCAN SW. Then, of course, as Jake mentioned, the pinch zone is on dip switch 4. That is the same on both the FLATSCAN SW and the FLATSCAN 3D. Now, when we go to the FLATSCAN 3D and look at the same dip switch, again, dip switch 1 is the same as Jake mentioned previously. The dip switch 2 now has been changed to an environmental. It changes some of the aspects of the sensor if it has that negative light that's impacting the sensor negatively. The background is another way to turn it on and off. This aspect on the FLATSCAN SW would be the anti-masking, but you can also turn it on and off here. Dip switch 4, again, is the same, is the pinch zone, turning it on or turning it off. By the way, you can also turn on or off the pinch zone with the remote on either sensor. But in order to do that, the dip switch must be in the on position. That's also true of dip switch 1. If you wanted to use the remote to adjust those, you could do that, but the dip switch must be in the on position. This slide will show you that these aspects of it. Of course, on the FLATSCAN SW, C is your width on the main curtain, D is your height on the main curtain. That would remain the same between both sensors. But as Jake mentioned in his presentation of the FLATSCAN 3D, it has 4 curtains, to where the FLATSCAN SW has simply 1 curtain that covers the face. And you can see the notes on A and B. A is the adjustment on the width of the pinch zone. And if you adjust that to 000, you've adjusted essentially the same as turning dip switch off, 4 off. But dip switch 4 has to be in the on position in order to be able to communicate any of these settings. Okay. And then the output configuration, this is where, again, it says dip switch 3 must be on in order for you to use the remote. So if you did want to do that, that's fine. Or with the FLATSCAN SW and the FLATSCAN SW only, you could use dip switch 2. I apologize, dip switch 3 for the normally closed or normally open adjustment. When you go to the FLATSCAN SW, you will have an immunity adjusting with the ghost on the remote. That's only available through the remote, and dip switch 2 must be on in order for it to communicate this. And again, on SW only. This is a difference between one of the differences between the FLATSCAN SW and the 3D. The uncovered zone is adjusted with the F2, and your anti-masking that I was talking about is the shaky box on the remote. These you will only find are adjustable by the remote. When you go into the FLATSCAN 3D remote settings, you'll notice some slight differences. You do have the anti-masking on-off ability, which also can be utilized on dip switch 2. And on the FLATSCAN 3D, you must and only can adjust the relays with the remote. The relays are a 3-button adjustment because relay 1, as listed here, is your output 1, which is for your stop side. Your second digit would be for the reopening side, reactivation. The third digit would be for your virtual push button. So hitting unlock puts it into program mode. Hitting this relay button will give you a rapid red blink, and then you would enter your 3 digits. If you had normally open circuits across the board, you would just hit 1, 1, 1, and you'd have all normally open. If, as an example, with a BSUM Swing Master, you had the relay 1 is normally open, 1, relay 2 is normally closed for that control, the E-tick control, so you'd hit 2, and your virtual push button, you could just leave it on 1 and hit 1 or 2, depending on your control and your configuration. On the FLATSCAN SW and the FLATSCAN 3D, resetting using the remote is quite simple. Both of these are going to remain the same. Unlock puts it into program mode, blinking red. When you hit the command, the magic wand, it'll blink rapidly. And of course, if you wanted to do a teach-in via the remote, you could hit 0, or 8 would be a full reset, and 9 would be a partial reset. So in the partial reset, if you didn't want to wipe out some of your memory and you just wanted to retune your sensor, essentially. So talking about the virtual push button on the FLATSCAN 3D, Jake mentioned that we have to use this as a secondary type activation. And that's because when your door opens, this button would disappear. But this output is utilized on the gray wires that are not on the harness for the FLATSCAN SW. So the 2 added wires are for this function, and that's where the third relay is for the virtual push button. And this has a tune-in process that Jake was kind of displaying to you that would be beside the door, and you would have it in a specific location. It does come with some stickers with it if you wanted to utilize those to let people know. And this is more for convenience, as we're showing here on the surgical room or that type of application where you had clean rooms, some reason to not want to touch anything. And again, as Jake mentioned, the LED turns blue when you have an activation on this. Going to the last slide here, we're going to show the difference between the 2 sensors and their fields. The FLATSCAN 3D, as Jake mentioned, has 4 curtains, and you can really see an emphasis on the difference of the depth. Now, with the 4 curtains, if you had the larger area that Jake was referencing on a pair of doors, this prevents the doors from having that scare type effect where the doors start closing and a person, obviously sees it and they get startled. So with the 4 curtains in the full open position, the doors will hold open. If somebody's in the pathway, it's going to hold open. And that's the whole reason for the 4 curtains. Now, as Jake mentioned, the grocery stores with fast moving traffic and the smaller areas that are tight with guide rails in and out, single-use doors, people are moving, the laser curtains work very effectively and will absolutely secure your door and the people going through them. But there's one curtain, which makes the FLATSCAN ideal for those fast traffic areas where people are moving in and out. They really don't sit in one particular place. And of course, the pinch zone is offered on both sensors and is adjustable via either the remote or the dip switch 4 on either sensor. However, if you are going to adjust the pinch zone with the remote, you have to have dip switch 4 in the on position on both the FLATSCAN SW and the FLATSCAN 3D. So the pinch zone adjustment, the pinch zone that we mentioned is on dip switch 4 on both of them. And this can be turned off, obviously, from the dip switch 4, or you can use the remote with the letter A and going to 000. And this is an excellent aspect of the both sensors, making the door safer for those little fingers that children sometimes stick in the area of the hinge.
Thank you everyone for watching this Tech Time Live. This is Jake and Rob here discussing the important aspects of the FLATSCAN 3D versus the regular FLATSCAN SW. We went over the physical structure, the differences between the dip switch configuration, the wiring, and the curtains. Whatever you needed to know between the differences between the two, we went over here. If you like more videos like this, we do have the YouTube channel. You might find some videos that'll help you out in the future that you didn't know were on there. So thanks for watching and come back soon.